Hi everyone, and welcome to the second session of this day. The second speaker of this afternoon is Ibukunoluwa Akinrinde, and he is the leader of he's the lead behavioral economist in policy unit innovation, which employs behavioral science to improve the public policy implementation. He has previously worked within the World Economic Forum and BCG, McKinsey, and African Union. And today he will present his talk titled Applying Behavioral Science to Public Policy and its Implementation. There will be time for questions at the end of the session, so please feel free to raise your hand or write your questions in the questions and answers chat, please. I leave the floor to you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I take this moment to appreciate the organizer. I'm sorry, can we hear me? Hello, can we hear me? All right. I assume we can hear me. I take this moment to appreciate everyone, the organizers and all, that have put this wonderful program together. First and foremost, to me, this is the first invite that I would get from a student community, particularly student groups themselves, to speak to them. I mean, from my alma mater, I have received invites to do some meetups with them, but more of a dinner event, not really to challenge ourselves for the purposes why we are in the community. And I've received invites from governing councils of universities, but it's not as enticing as when students themselves reach out to you, and I want to commend us for this. So I'm hopeful we would have a good time. That said, my name once again is Ibukunoluwa Akinrinde, and I'm speaking to us on applying behavioral science to public policy and its implementation. I have listened into my previous speaker, and it just looked like we had some similar thought process, and that is the beauty of behavioral science in practice. I considered having two sessions, a general overview of public policy dedicated B nudge unit in Nigeria, and then how we go about it here, and two, I would be making a case study, an analysis to show you or exemplify how we really get hands dirty with the practice of behavioral science. It's really an academic stroke management consultancy type engagement, stroke practice, and then it's really enriching and exposing. With this, I would like to just move on to show that my table of contents are just what we see here. About the PIU broad goals, that is short for Policy Innovation Unit. The PIU service offerings, the behavioral science and practice, phases of behavioral testing, iterative cyclical phasing of behavioral change management, nudge unit prototypes in different climes, which and low-hanging fruits, some high-level sectoral behavioral considerations. And when we get to part two, we'll look at some of the other table issues that will be the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. And then it's a private sector-led public policy advisory think tank. And it's aged about 25 years now. And it's one of the most reputed agency or platform for public-private dialogue with the government, even up to the presidency. And we've earned our credibility for the while and significantly impacted policy change in Nigeria. The NESG came about during the time of the elites who still have some relationships that they can broker with these people, and they will listen to them to come together, and the well-meaning elites of Nigeria brought up this. We had the likes of founders of banks and lead heads of oil companies, the Shells, the ExxonMobil, think of it, Chevron and all. They came together. It was like a club of economic influencers who really wanted to change the narrative from draconian rules that sometimes we are not substantially driven by sound economic judgments. So that said, a business case for the PIU is was to diversify the NESG's offerings from just traditional economic advisory to looking at cutting edge insights that behavioral economics, a new field, can bring, or flavor that it can bring to our practice, improving policy advisory, knowing fully well that policy issues can be both structural and behavioral, and structural solutions don't necessarily fix behavioral problems adequately. So that's the wisdom behind this, and it's been a good journey so far. So the PIU goal is replete as written here, and it's design interventions that will optimize the delivery and adoption of public policy programs and initiatives. That's the overarching issue, and all of that are complementary. PIU service offerings has listed, and this is a growing concern. It's a dynamic ecosystem. It keeps growing. The PIU is looking into more recent issues of fourth industrial revolution, embedding issues of A and B testing, which we now see in the social media analytics and all of those, some level of artificial intelligence and all of those judgments using some machine learning and all to curate behavioral insights, web scrubbing, looking at backends to see patterns and directions of interactions. That's the PIU as it were. Behavioral science in practice. We define our problems, we design tests, and it's quite academic hypothesis and interventions to follow that up. Implement the tests and then pilot. We start by piloting sometimes and then monitoring for implementation. And then scale that we collect data, we do all of those, and we refine and roll out. We refine, we iterate, we go back to the drawing board. We keep finding touch points to improve, behavioral touch points to improve as we see patterns from insights we collect. That said, phases of behavioral testing, stakeholder mapping, both on the demand side and the supply side, diagnosis and design, implementation, analysis, and scaling. All of these are very interesting processes to follow through. They are stepwise, and I tell audiences when I'm speaking to them or clients that behavioral science is pathfinding. It's not like traditional consultancy or projects where you can from the beginning tell what you will do at the end. You just need to follow the stepwise order. You'll be open to innovation, fluidity, being flexible and willing to adapt to the flow of investigation you are realizing. Not that you just come with a one-size-fits-all approach to hack down a problem. That said, iterative cyclical phasing of behavioral science, behavioral management, change management. What I've just tried to relay here is that it is circular. You start from designing of a problem, you move to testing, you move to implementing the test, analyze the results, refine and roll out. When you roll out, you gather insights from the rollout. You observe that there are still behavioral touch points to improve. Maybe the outcome you want to realize, you saw some minor improvements, but it's not yet at the scale you wanted. You go back to designing the problem, you feed in the insights from this, it's still the same message, we would get it. So I also put up this, and I saw it's more of like a schema to show a typical time chart of how we engage our processes. It's not rigid. It depends on what the client wants and what's feasible. But many times it's when we enter the project, we understand the context clearly. The client might just be clear that, oh, we want to improve uptick in our loan product. Maybe the government has a conditional cash transfer that they are trying to pursue and want to approve uptick. That's all they see. But when we get in, we know the behavioral barriers and all of those when we do the demand side, supply side, gap analysis and all of those. So it's in the project you understand the context. You don't approach it as though you have done a lot of conditional cash transfer projects or a lot of this and just come with the notion that you have the solution. No, you get into it, you follow the steps. It's up again. All right. Please keep pardoning me. I wouldn't know why my system is tripping off. But that said, I move quickly. These are not unit prototypes in different climes that we are ahead of the PIU. The PIU was established in 2017, and at the time it was established through the aegis or the support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We were made to understand that it was the first in Africa. So I don't hold that ground to foment any debate. But the point is, we had behavioral nudge units in Africa, but they were not public policy dedicated. They could do one or two things with the government, but that was not strictly their focus. They work with business enterprises to improve digital payments, to do this and that with private sector. But this is government and public policy focused. And even if we have to do anything with the private sector, we do things that aligns with achieving public policy imperatives. We don't go to implement behavioral science for maybe a commercial entity to improve its adverts and all of those. Well, it would have been a good revenue stream, but we are for national good strictly, and that's the reason why the PIU was established to support the government of Nigeria. That's it. This circle shows a couple of interventions we've deployed: market money, trader money, homegrown school feeding, Empower program. It's a youth skill empowerment program, government JIP and conditional cash transfer programs. And of late, we've worked with the United Nations Global Compact to develop some cash transfer projects for poor women and all of those, and other projects with Makato, BIT, Chatham House, and all of those. So the PIU has been graced with the audience of pre-existing BI units that has enriched our nascent growth and existence. So that's it. I swing into the second phase. A case study of behavioral insights for all. Learnings from CCT engagement of PIU. This is just one case, and I would like to talk through it. What is the problem you are solving and context? That's how to come about a behavioral problem. And ideal and actual process maps. What specific behavioral barriers are you addressing? What is the outcome you are measuring? Those are the kind of things we ask ourselves. What intervention or campaign are you proposing, and how does it address the behavioral barriers? What is the potential way you can test or not your intervention will be successful? So these are the key asks we take ourselves through to lead ourselves to a solution. And we iterate. As I earlier mentioned, it's cyclical. We get back to it. We can do it. We can work on a project about 3 or 4 times, sometimes 6 times, depending on what you really want to achieve. You would already have started scoring points in the progress you want to see, but you are learning more to improve more. And so that's behavioral science for us. So in the case of the CCT, what we wanted to achieve was provide 10,000 naira to the poorest of the poor households and most vulnerable households, improve the household consumption. These are the final goal of it. Beyond just giving them the money, we we want to see this impact, improve consumption, ensure human capital development, and provide livelihood support in terms of enterprise development and all of those things that would make all of these interventions sustainable. Then it was overarchingly overlaid with the goal of driving financial inclusion. So we won't necessarily be giving them this money in cash. Maybe we want to deploy banking instruments or non-traditional banking instruments to see how to get these people there. So that means we want to onboard them, we want to register them to banking systems and all of those, especially those in the rural areas where they are poor. So all of those needed some architecture of behavioral thinking. How do we pass this message across? How do we get them comfortable and get to achieve the goals we want to see? So that said, what's the problem you're trying to aims at responding to the efficiency, capacity, and lack of investment in human capital of the poor and vulnerable through unconditional. It's unconditional in this case. There are types of conditional cash transfers, unconditional bi-monthly cash transfers to the poorest and most vulnerable persons in Nigeria. And I will give some statistics of our findings from the database of the Population Commission and all of those. And we found this, and we drilled down to states, and we drilled down to wards, and there's a way we had to randomly select the poor that we want to work with to test our interventions. So when you are also doing the what we call power CAC, we go through a sort of academic process. If you are conversant with experimental designs and implementation, we deploy all that to select randomly. Even if it's RCT or pseudo experimental approaches we want to use, we put all those to play. I put this up to show us how we walk through our process maps and really find where the behavioral gaps are for both the demand side and the supply side. So this process map is a supply side process map where we meet the supply side players. Supply side players are the government, the program initiators, the people that are implementing the program, and all of those are majorly on the government side. There might be various agencies interlayering to work together to achieve this. And we really would drill down through the issues we want to achieve, and we'll check the boxes to say that the process starts from point 1 to point 5. And here is what I wrote out here. If you see what I'm moving about, this is the process we found. Household selection, caregiver selection, enumeration, disbursement, post-disbursement, and all of those. Then we move on to, this was what we found out from our supply side. And apparently, we found this similar on the demand side. So when the supply side is going out for household selection, apparently the demand side is being selected on the supply side. This demand side, there's some pari passu here, but there are cases where the supply side process is not exactly the demand side process. But that is how when you get through the findings process to really see what is obtainable. So we then ask ourselves, what specific this isn't two about 6 steps I'm going to race through so that we have time for questions. We map out the behavioral barriers. This is because the supply side and the demand side analysis or behavioral gap assessment is similar. Household selection, caregiver selection, enumeration of household, disbursement of cash transfer, and post-disbursement. Now, a behavioral barrier, we explained the process. This is the intended process, as it were, when you sit with the people at the drawing table. But this is the actual process. Community nomination of household heads. HH means household head, based on NASCO rankings. This is the group that is responsible for the poverty mapping data sets. They have the data set of poverty, poor households in Nigeria, and they do that through the aegis or support of the World Bank. Assessing suitability of household members as caregivers. So amongst the still assess who is suitable to be a caregiver, such that the goal will be achieved, reliable and all of those. And it's based on some psychometric analysis and all they would do, and random judgments based on the database they have, and all of those. So we go through all of this, and we try to keep to the EAST principle of easy, accessible, and simple and timely framework. Let me quickly race through. Then we come to specific behavioral barriers. So in between each of these processes, you see the red line I'm touching. I don't know if my screen is still showing. This red line is where we find the behavioral gaps. That means there normally be a behavioral gap between a process to another process. And then I identified some of the behavioral gaps. It's both on supply side and demand side. And many of the and not necessarily behavioral gaps. First of all, let's call it gaps. These gaps could be structural and could be behavioral. We collect everything we can find, and we come back to the drawing board to sieve between what is structural and what is behavioral. So I pieced through some anecdotal collection of the behavioral gaps. Sometimes it could be through a catty computer-aided telephone interview or different approaches to collecting this kind of information and insight. Lack of proper channels of information disbursement from the CTFs, conditional cash transfer officers. That's what we call them. Conditional cash transfer facilitators. That's what CTF means. Lack of social proof information within cooperatives. We encouraged cooperative arrangement. The behaviors we want to see. The decision to join or contribute towards a cooperative, and many more issues that are rarely here. Those are findings, and we sat down to sift through what is behavioral, what is structural. That's fine. I wouldn't read through all of this, but they are very salient issues. Then we ask ourselves, what specific behavioral barriers are we addressing? Deducible behavioral touch points to consider in optimizing the impact of a typical credit or livelihood program. When you get the behavioral barriers, you can bucket them. You would often be able to say that this is the salience issue based on even the all of those. And sometimes, if this project being a pathfinding one, you can even find out new issues that, based on substantial scientific evidence, can curate new heuristics that will be added to the lexicons or the dictionary of the growing field, behavioral science. So, communication, group participation, these are behavioral issues we saw, and we found that these are the touch points to really move the needle. Community trust in formal financial systems, trust, cooperation, communication, social networks, cooperation. I'm repeating them, but there were ways we saw them. Like when we saw trust, communication, and cooperation, we found something connecting them together. And so these are the ways we figured this out. That's it. What are the outcomes you are measuring? Expected outcomes, outputs, and outcomes. I pieced this table together. This is just a snippet of what the bigger efforts would put to play. It's a very dirty process. A CCT program identified gap after much processes as the previous issue development. That's the behavioral gap. And sometimes we find a lot of behavioral gaps and we have to prioritize. And so we call this stakeholder running. What will make the most impact if we address it from such a point? So we don't just address all the problems because resources are thin and time is limited, and all of those. There are ways we get around that. Two priorities: intervention around entrepreneurial planning, and interventions around increasing savings behavior. And it still comes to play with the concept of opportunity cost. We put all of those together here. Improvement in the average monthly amount saved for specified entrepreneurial intents. So we had behavioral in nudges to prime them to entrepreneurial intentions, and also to prime them to save, to feed that intention. and we leveraged communal arrangements such that even the money you have might not be able to nurture your intentions. But if there are some group of people that have similar intentions, they are clustered together, they pursue the goal together, pool funds together, achieve it, maybe get a machinery to move it, to add value to what they are doing, and then communal efforts try to improve all of this. So and we subjected them to measurements and testing. So that's it. Very quickly, I'm about to finishing. What interventions and all of those. So I just showed you how we prioritize high cost, low cost, high cost, low expected value, high expected value. When we subject all the perspectives we have and next year and there, with the prioritization will come very crystal clear. Then what interventions through campaign are you proposing, and how does it address the behavioral barriers interventions implemented? These are the interventions we implemented after a couple of iterations and ranking and prioritization. And then we thought of putting forth growth champions, people that are doing well in the interventions, using them to prime others to also follow suit. We also leverage role model interventions, where a public figure that is known for this, maybe a TV star and stuff, used to reach out to them at their level and all of those. So we also used lockbox devices to distill discipline to savings. And once it reaches after a given period of time, they are primed to keep it in the bank and all of those. And there were a lot of reasons that went on to all of this, and we deployed testings to them too, not just ad hoc efforts. That said, I'm wrapping up now. In the final analysis, the ideal picture of the behavioral science knowledge unit, for which the PIU is still assiduously working towards, is to create a knowledge unit of open imagination, integrative design and system thinking, complex project orchestration, disclosing new words, complexity, complexity theories and ethnography and some other things, all what we use together makes up some novelty in insights gathering and finding. Collaborative engagement, learning and engaging, literature review, fit studies, interviews and all of those, reflecting and creating. This is the heart of what we do. No one is an island in this work. Even nobody counts his suggestions or perspectives dumb. It's interactive all the way. New frontier, pushing the boundary of public and private sector problem solving. When I say private sector, as it relates to prevention designs, experimental designs, RCT, quasi-experimental approaches, power calculation.
Ibukun, it seems we have
economic lab games, Z3O, think about it, Python, statistical coding and all of those. All those come to play. We do web scrubbing sometimes to understand how people engage with notice it. So I'm moving. This is my last slide.
Just your slides are off again. Just to advise you. If you want, given that maybe there is some internet connection problem, you might want to hide your video so that there is a better internet connection. You might want to try that just for the end of the session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
No
I will just do that. That said, I'm in my second to last slide. These are some pictures of the outcomes we found with our interventions, and for the growth champions, we saw it increased uptake in cooperative behavior by 16%, increased in frequency of cooperative meetings. Growth champion, a case where we had a champion that was trying to help others to conform, and all of those, and it's amongst themselves, and that leverage social prestige, status, and all of those to make others fall in line to what they should do right. Social relative ranking, where we are using a peer that is doing well to nudge others to do better, and all of those, and then commitment device lockbox, where we made a mock-up. I created a mock-up, an artifact to help people you can see we had some messaging around it with targeting. There are soft commitment devices, there are hard commitment devices. All of those have some nuances in how we thought about this, but we only use soft commitment device. That where I would like to rest it. What is the one potential way you can test whether or not your interventions will be successful? Scalable recommendations from the implementation of the intervention. So we reduce the insights. We have many more, but because of the purposes of a case study and just relaying how the process works, we realize that utilizing commitment development individual and group goals in a more disciplined way, and they achieved results. Spread the relative rankings of beneficiaries' savings through existing cooperative structure groups as means to improve their general savings. And we found real uptick in this and many more that have not relayed because it's a whole lot. But that said, this is the much learnings we gathered, and I hope have been able to push this across in a simple way. That I also would like to say that knowing that this is a community service, I am open to lending an helping hand to Warwick Behavioural Insight team, pro bono, anytime they need, or even in a structured way, in a structured engagement to support if they do things like this, and then see how to promote behavioral science in my own little way. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It has been a very nice
Hello, I'm through.
talk.
Any questions?
Yeah, we have some questions. And we also would like to ask you, given that there has been some internet problems, whether would it be possible to share your slides to the speakers, to the attendees afterwards? I'm sure they will enjoy it. So as for the questions, we have one here. How was social relative ranking exactly used during the intervention?
So I think electoral network is breaking up. We don't know how best we can communicate, but I'm not hearing you very well.
Can you hear me?
Maybe it's mine, I don't know, but if you can hear me well, maybe then I'm not hearing you. I didn't hear the question.
I can hear
it looks like you're breaking up. Or do you mind texting
I'll try to repeat the question.
All right, I think. Okay.
How was social relative ranking exactly used during the intervention?
How was social relative ranking? All right. So the way social relative ranking was used was we clustered the communities. We had communities, and some communities had about 3 villages and all of those. And inside the villages, the poor households that were selected, maybe they might be up to 10 for the conditional cash transfer, and for our pilot we might only be working with they might be up to 50, but for our pilots we might be only working with 10, and so randomly selected. Then we call them together for sort of a community meeting. We cluster them to say, what are your likes, what are your enterprise, and oftentimes we found out that entrepreneurial interests of communities and community members are alike, because oftentimes they are largely agrarian. So maybe in a community they are largely cassava producing, and literally everybody is into that. So in clustering, they might tell you that they want a sun dryer, a machine that helps them to dry instead of having to go to spread cassava under the sun, just like that. So that dehydrates moisture content, removes moisture content, all of those. And it might just mean one person's funds can't really purchase it. So we cluster. You, this community, this is what you said. You, this cluster, this is what you really want to achieve. Then another cluster might, in that same value chain, have another priority. We cluster based on priority, such that likes meet likes. Then the only thing is that we now prime them. What's your goal based on this money you receive? And okay, they set the goal. Based on each note where they write they choose to do what they want to do with ease, and then that's where relative social ranking comes, and we see the uptick in the way everybody is nudged to compliance. Hello.
Hi. Yes, I think there are still some problems.
Hello.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes. Did you hear me?
Yes. There are still some problems. Unfortunately, we hope we will fix them. We have other questions. One of these is, how did you identify the barriers? Hello?
All right. I've stopped my video to see whether reception will be clearer. I wouldn't know if you can repeat it.
How did you identify the barriers?
Repeat yourself, please. I didn't hear what else you said.
The question is, how did you...
The barriers, the approach to identifying barriers is... Oh, I heard you that. I heard you clear. The approach to identifying barriers starts even from the beginning. Even when you are randomly meeting at inception of client engagement, that's even at the beginning. All the way you're identifying barriers anyway. You meet them, you hear why they are calling you to look into a problem set, and you get into stakeholder mapping, and you are meeting the stakeholders in the supply side and demand side to map behavioral gaps. Sometimes you leverage focus groups, you leverage one-on-one interview, you leverage even sometimes mystery shopping, some very many nuances of approaches to evidence to really see where these pinpoints are. So we still do pretty much what you do in a typical consultancy or even in a random fact-finding process. So that's how we identify behavioral barriers, and we do that intelligently. So as we are seeing behaviors, we are summarizing it with a name. Oh, this looks like a salience issue. This looks like something bias. This looks like that, and we bucket it and explain it vividly so that other team members can see through our perspectives as we saw it when we went to field.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. Unfortunately, we are running out of time now because we have to move on to the next session. But thanks very much, Ibukun, for your talk. That's been very interesting, and we hope to hear from you soon.
All right.